Okay, so round 8, I'm playing against FM Austin May. I think he's in FM. He's like over 2,300 FIDE. And in this game, I went back to the Sicilian with e6, d4, takes, knight c6, knight c3, and a6. So in this position, I've mainly played the Taimanov Sicilian with queen c7. In the previous game, I played knight f6, which is the 4-knight Sicilian. Here I decide to play a6, which is another sideline. I'm not sure which one this. I'm not sure actually the name of this. I feel like, in my mind, it's just Paulsen. I feel like Louis Paulsen is responsible for all these different lines. But I don't know if it has an official name, because Taimanov is with queen c7, and the Khan Sicilian is without knight to c6 generally, because the Khan is all about putting that knight on d7 and playing it like a hedgehog. So this is basically like a hybrid Taimanov Khan. Here White has a bunch of different options, but he decided to take on c6, which is definitely one of the big main lines. And normally White is not always wanting to take on c6 in the Sicilian, but this move a6 is not that useful for Black in this position, and so here it's kind of a better version for White compared to some other lines. So bishop d3, d5, we get this usual structure, knight f6, and yeah, White has many different ways of developing here, like queen e2, rook e1, queen f3, b3, lots and lots of different moves. Here he goes for bishop f4, which I think is kind of a trendy line. Bishop e7, queen e2. I castled, rook a d1. At this point, I'm definitely out of book. Like, I didn't really study this exact position, but you know, Black's ideas are generally pretty thematic here. Bishop often goes to b7, and then Black plays for either c5 or a5, and just tries to get some counterplay. And the bishop looks dumb, but I mean, once Black gets c5 in, and the bishop often is just becoming a powerhouse. So here White played e5, which is a typical move, knight d7, and now queen to g4. And yeah, sometimes White can get quite a dangerous attack on the king side here, and so it's really a tricky position for Black to play. It's not always so easy. Like queen h5 here is not necessarily anything special. Black is just going to go g6, and then rook e8 and put something on f8, like knight f8 or bishop f8, and often defend the king side this way. So the position is really double-edged, because if White's attack is not successful, then a lot of times Black just kind of takes over, just gets tons of counterplay on the queen side, and just gets a very, very nice game. So queen g4, g6, rook fe1. And here I decide to play a5, which is one of two main plans in the position. The idea here is usually to go bishop a6 and just trade off the light squared bishops. Of course, this light squared bishop is like White's kind of most important attacking piece. And if Black can trade it off, then White's attack really often loses a lot of steam. Looking back at it now, I feel like c5 is probably a stronger move, and just playing for more counterplay just in the center. Maybe c4, maybe d4 somewhere. The queen can come out to b6, and definitely it's a very sharp position. But I feel like Black has their fair share of counterplay here. After a5, it definitely gets a little tricky. So knight e2, I think very nice move, looking to transfer the knight either to g3 or d4. And here I go bishop a6, and this is probably a mistake. I mean, it was of course my intended follow-up with a5, but I could still go c5 at this point. I could also go a4, which I think may have been a little bit better. And then the idea is to still play for c5 and just use the bishop on this diagonal. Because after bishop a6, I mean, this is very desirable, but Black is just not really in time here to fully mobilize. Yeah, I think Black did lose some time with bishop b7. Yeah, because I have to play bishop a6. We definitely lost one tempo, but I don't think it's such a huge deal in this position. For example, White played queen e2 and then played queen to g4. You know, so I think it's more about like achieving what you want from the position, and if it takes an extra move, so be it. But yeah, from my point of view, I was still very happy to trade off the light square bishops. Though unfortunately, in this case, it simply doesn't work out. So that's why I think some other idea was needed, mainly with a4 or c5 and playing this way. So bishop a6, knight d4, and now I take on d3. Very important that knight takes c6 here. looks like a fantastic in-between move because it's hitting the queen and the bishop on e7 with check. But here black has bishop f5. And so I've snagged a piece, and I'm keeping an extra piece in the position. If white takes, I'll just recapture, and yeah, keeping a piece up in the end. And otherwise, I'm just going like queen e8 here and holding on to everything. But white just recaptures, rook takes d3. Now I played queen to b6. And here white is getting some, very concrete play. Starting with this move, bishop h6. So immediate knight e6 was not working. After takes, rook f7. If white takes this piece back, there's rook takes f4 at the end, and then queen takes f2, and mate is hanging. Or as Jesse likes to call it, the millennial trick. But bishop h6 first, rook e8. And here white definitely, it looks like, has a chance to sack on e6, but I was definitely hoping for this one. Of course, if I take back, then that's no good. White can take on d7. But black has other moves, mainly bishop b4 is actually quite annoying with this counterattack against the rook. Or as I was going to play, actually queen b4, I think is even more accurate. Where I hit the rook, I hit white's queen, and white's knight just doesn't have any useful jumps here. So after queen takes b4, for example, the idea is to recapture with the bishop, very important to keep that tempo. And the knight is still hanging here. If white goes c3, then we're taking the knight, white takes the bishop, we recapture. And we end up in this endgame with equal material, but black just has this like absolutely beautiful structure. White's pawns are super weak. And yeah, I judge this to be much, much better for black, if not totally winning. So yeah, I was kind of hoping for this one, but instead white goes rook b3 first, which is very logical because if you see knight takes e6 is met with queen b4 or bishop b4, then yeah, rook to b3. But then this gives black the chance to drop back with queen to c7. And here I actually kind of felt like I'm okay because I'm hitting the e-pawn. I have ideas of pushing c5 or knight c5 or a4, rook b8. Seems like black has tons and tons of counterplay. But then white actually hit me with knight takes e6, which I looked at very carefully. I didn't think this was working. But then once he played it, of course, I got very worried that I missed something. White had other options here as well. So he goes for rook b3 and knight takes e6. After the game, I think we were looking at this move, queen f4, which I think is also very annoying for black, and just preparing rook f3 and just taking advantage of the fact that we can't put a rook on f8. And if I remember correctly, the only way to defend this one is to play f6, which is not an easy move to make, but we're hitting e5, and if white takes, then bishop takes, and yeah, black has to give up this pawn, but somehow hold the position. But it's, yeah, very, very tricky, and I think not easy for black to play at all. So I really did misplay this one. I think this a5 bishop a6 plan in this case was not correct, and of course I needed to go c5 much earlier. So we end up getting this. So I'm forced to take queen takes e6, king h8, queen f7. White has sacrificed the piece, playing for mate. I was pretty sure bishop f8 looked like an only move here. And I didn't exactly see where white is going with this one. Because after bishop f8, g7 is covered. I'm threatening to take the bishop. I'm also threatening to play rook takes e5 and play against white's back rank. So rook h3 was the main move I looked at here. If e6, then the rook is still hanging on e1, so I can just go bishop takes h6, and white has nothing. So rook h3, and I played rook takes e5. And this was around where I stopped my calculations originally, because I didn't see any clear tactics for white. I'm up a piece. I've got this back rank trick. Of course, rook takes e5, queen takes e5, and I'm still hitting the back rank. And so, yeah, once we got here, of course, my opponent started thinking, because there's lots of options for white. But yeah, I just couldn't quite see anything that white can do. If bishop e3, for example, I was a little bit worried about this one, because of course white is threatening mate, as well as maybe bishop d4. But here I can go bishop g7, so bishop d4 no longer possible. And if queen takes g6, then either knight f8 or I think even knight f6 is more active. And yeah, black mobilizes the pieces and I think is doing fantastic. White just has no attack, no more targets anymore. So yeah, I wasn't sure what my opponent was going to do. I thought maybe rook f1 might be a good try. And here, I'm pretty sure I have to play rook to e7, because otherwise bishop takes f8 is a very important threat. And after rook e7, white can go bishop g7 check. I don't think there's anything else, but here at least white wins some material back. And yeah, something like rook f8. I mean, black has 2 pieces for the rook and pawn. I feel like black should be better here. Definitely the game continues, and it won't be easy to convert, but I mean, based on the position I had earlier, I felt like, yeah, this is, I have no problems playing this, given that I was on the verge of losing maybe a couple of moves ago, because it did look kind of like I was under pressure. So I thought maybe that was the best white could do. Eventually, he ends up playing bishop d2, but this one simply just concretely doesn't work out. Bishop g7, rook takes e5, and now very important move, queen takes e5, of course. If queen takes g6, then again, I could go knight f6 here and everything is defended. But this line hinges on a very important tactical line, because white can win back the piece with queen takes d7, but the point is black has queen e2 at the end. And I'm hitting the bishop, I'm hitting the back rank once again. And here actually very important to see that rook e3 looks very nice for white, but doesn't actually save the game. So I can take the bishop, queen d1, rook e1 doesn't really change anything, but queen takes d2, rook e8 check. It looks like actually black is losing at first glance, because takes runs into mate, but thankfully black has bishop f8 here. And because of the threat of the back rank, white's not in time to take the rook. White would have to fix the back rank with something like g3, but then black can of course trade rooks, play like queen b4, and finally hold on to the extra piece. It's still not the easiest position to win. I mean, white has a couple pawns for the bishop, but I think once things stabilize, then yeah, black should have really good chances here. So that was important to see. I mean, I didn't see all this from when I played, queen c7 here, but once we got to this moment, it was important to realize that, yeah, rook e5 is possible. And so at this point, actually, I think white is basically lost. The game finished after queen e2, rook e3 I took. But actually makes another mistake here and goes g3 rather than playing rook e8 check first and forcing bishop f8, because this allows black to just get the rook in immediately with rook f8. And now it's actually just immediately over, because f2 is falling. White has no way of defending everything. Back rank is still hanging, and yeah, just immediately lost. So white ended up resigning here. After the game, people were following the game. They had mentioned that in this position here, after rook takes e5, apparently the engine was pointing out this move as being very, very strong for white, rook e3, which, yeah, I can tell you during the game I didn't consider it at all. And then afterwards, I think when we were analyzing with the opponent, I don't think either of us thought about this move in the postmortem. But it turns out to be a very strong move. I mean, the idea is mainly to keep the rook on the e-file, which means black is not able to play rook e7, which is very important because white is threatening bishop takes f8 here. And it's actually not easy for black to defend this one. Now, very important line is after rook takes e3, the point is that white is taking with the rook here, and bishop takes h6 is met with rook to e7. So it's like a short line, it's only a couple of moves, but I think for a human it's very, very hard to see that this is working. Because in this position, like if you're counting rook takes e3, 100% the main move you're looking at is bishop takes, right? Because you immediately threaten mate, you get your bishop to this diagonal. I think it's very unlikely like you would look at this one with this idea like bishop h6, rook e7. So definitely felt like a line that was hard to find, but maybe it would make for a nice puzzle. There are some other tactical points to this one, like if black plays, I think, let's say rook takes e3 and queen d6 here, so trying to defend this way, then white has bishop f4. And if queen f6, looking for queen takes d7, queen takes f4, white has bishop e5. which wins because after knight e5, there's queen takes f6. Although even this doesn't fully win because black can play queen takes e5 and actually get a queen for 3 pieces. But fortunately, white gets immediately one of the pawns with queen e6, bishop g7, and f4. So just a very, very concrete thing. Like without this f4 move, I think black would actually be doing fantastic. 3 pieces for the queen. But after f4, the knight has to move. This position, I mean, definitely not a simple win for white. The engine seems to think, it's just easy, like b3, then you take here. But already here, for example, I think it would be very tempting to take on c6 first. But then black would go rook d8, b3, the knight can jump to e3. In this position, I think, it would be quite difficult for white to win. But still, I mean, that was by far white's best chance and would have put black under very, very serious pressure. Very surprising tactic, really. I wasn't sure how to feel about this one. Definitely wasn't the cleanest game. I was happy to win, but I felt like my middle game play could definitely be improved quite a bit here. But I wasn't too upset about missing this one. I don't know. To me, this looked like such a computery move that sometimes these things are gonna happen. But okay, so that wraps up round 8. I ended up winning this one and moving to +2 in the tournament. So I would be on 5 points out of 8 heading into the final round 9.